How's it going, guys? It's Chucky here. If you know anything about the OG community, you'll know that over the last 5 or 6 years, Minecraft players have been developing ways to get the rarest and most valuable usernames all to themselves. Since even before 2015, we've seen hacking, selling, social engineering, and a multitude of other methods used to get players access to their dream name. But today, I want to focus on one of the most prominent and widely accessible methods that even you could use to get your very own OG username: name sniping. Name sniping is quite easily one of the most important things in any community based around usernames. From Roblox to Twitter, it's allowed people to get OG names of their own, or transfer names from old accounts to better accounts, or ones with more security. However, I can't think of a community where name sniping is more important and prevalent than in Minecraft. Over the years, there have been dozens of companies, individuals, and programs that have been used to grab cool names for anyone that could pay the right price. Whether it be complete monopolies or complete anarchy, the timeline of these snipers is an incredibly detailed and interesting one. And with the last few months being absolutely insane for the sniper business, you'll want to stick around to the end of the video. I'll be taking you through the history, evolution, and eventual downfall of snipers, so sit back, get your snacks, and enjoy the video. Real quick before I get into it though, I just want to say that I am releasing a new Discord. I've really missed you guys while I've been gone, so if you guys want to come and hang out with a super welcoming and helpful community, the link will be on screen and at the top of the description. And if you're watching this video just after it goes up, I'll be streaming live on my Twitch at twitch.tv/IGNChucky. Come say hi, hang out, and drop me any questions you've got. The link will also be in the description. But with that out of the way, please make sure to like, subscribe, and enjoy the video. So as I mentioned, name sniping isn't exactly an uncommon concept across pretty much every game or platform. But what exactly is it, and why do people care so much? Well, if you're familiar with any OG community, you'd know that people are willing to pay hundreds if not thousands for certain names, so people have spent years learning and developing ways to get names and accounts that they would later be able to sell for some decent profit. Many people assume that on most platforms the way that this is achieved is by members actually just being OG and having been in the community long enough to actually make all the accounts right at the start. But often this is far from the truth. In most cases, barely any community-owned names were claimed in that method. Is usually by either hacking or, of course, sniping names. But what does that even mean? Well, in short, to snipe a name, you have to wait for it to come available and then claim it as quickly as possible, either by hand or using some sort of program coded specifically for this purpose. While name snipers do exist on most platforms, none have anywhere near as much variety and history behind them as Minecraft's does. Because of the way Minecraft's name-changing system works, it's incredibly easy to know when a certain name will be coming available. If you use a website such as NameMC, you can see exactly when a name was changed, and because all names come available exactly 37 days later, you can work out exactly what date and time a name will become available. Or you can just use the timer at the top of the page. That might be a bit easier. My point there though is that over the years, people have developed so many ways in Minecraft to get as much information on this as possible. NameMC is a website that was created in early 2015 simply just as a method to see upcoming names, and over time, it evolved into the almost social media resembling site it is now. It's got a friend system, viewable skins, and I'm getting off topic. To answer my own question though, if you wanted an exact definition, I'd say something like, sniping is the act of creating or changing an account's name to something special or rare, through timing it yourself or with the assistance of a program. Of course, there are exceptions here, such as bots that check for names that have been left unclaimed, but we won't be talking about those in this video. Instead, I want to take you through the history, evolution, and downfall of name snipers in Minecraft, as it actually goes a whole lot deeper than you may think. For the last 6 years, there have always been multiple people competing for the #1 spot in the industry, constantly discovering and improving new methods, and in some cases, investing thousands into it to try and make some profit. So let's go back a few years, to when the OG community was much smaller, and as cliche as it sounds, stuff was a lot simpler. Nowadays, it seems as though bot sniping is everywhere. If you've tried to hand snipe any high tier, low tier, or other name, I guess, you'll probably have had a run-in with some sort of bot that takes their name away from you instantly. These days, this is done by some sort of gift code sniper, which I'll explain later, but as you might be able to assume, that wasn't always the case. Sniping started in its earliest forms all the way back in 2015. Some of you will be familiar with the date February 4th, 2015. This is what's now referred to as Name Change Day, the day when Mojang finally added name changing to the game, alongside removing a bunch of old, inactive Minecraft accounts from the database, thus freeing up thousands of names. And on that day, a bunch of people spent a good amount of time taking most of these names in what was probably the biggest instance of hand sniping ever. PikaClicks covers this well in his video about how he got his name, so if you're interested in learning more about that, you can watch his video, and if this video hits 3,000 likes, I'll make a video on it myself. But regardless, that date was really just the beginning of something that would completely change the community forever. At the time, the community was super casual. Any market websites such as MCM were pretty small. Some people took accounts there to sell for a little bit of profit, but it wasn't a big thing. Decent names would sell for around $50, and top tier OGs worth thousands now would sell for a couple hundred at most. But most importantly, with the amount of names that dropped around name change day, people constantly had the ability to just pick up an OG name whenever they felt like it. While this might seem like a dream now, because of the abundance, people didn't just instantly take up every name because they wanted that status of being OG. They would only take something that they really wanted to have. But alongside the introduction of name changing, there was also a surge of people changing away from their OG names about a month after they got them, simply because they just got bored of them. You can see this in a lot of names from around that time, such as Warn or Zombie. It got to the point where there would be a couple dozen really good names dropping in just a weekend, which led people to think that they could maybe start taking it more seriously. People began to develop very basic auto-clicker scripts that would activate around the time the name was going to drop. They'd beat out some hand snipers, but because of various issues with latency and rate limiting, they weren't really that good. Also around that time, a forum called MC Market had begun to pick up traction. So a user named Doge with one of these scripts decided to make a post detailing what he'd made and to ask about some of the errors he got. The thread garnered mixed responses, from respected community members asking what the point even was, to people asking if they could buy it off of him. But eventually, a user named Jack caught sight of the thread, and as he was soon entering college majoring in software engineering, he decided to help Doge out and asked if he had any alts to test a more advanced sniper he'd started work on. And lo and behold, a few hours later, he reported back saying he tested out a really solid way of getting any name change instantly and consistently. It was still a pretty simple bot, but seeing as at the time name sniping was done by simply just changing the name on a Mojang account, it ended up working incredibly, to the point where it would get every single name it went for. There's uncertainty as to whether this was because there was no competitors or because it actually was ahead of its time. But to show how basic the bot actually was, it was coded in PHP, not a developer's most treasured language. However, even after its early success, people were still skeptical. There were people wondering why on earth it was even necessary to have a program that does this, as again the community was still really casual. But over time, things started to heat up in the sniping game, and it became much more evident why it was so useful. As April finished and we moved deeper into spring with May, Jack was still looking for something to boost his credibility, and luckily he got just the break he needed. The community had become aware of an upcoming name I mentioned earlier, Zombie. It was the biggest name to drop in a while, and a lot of people were going for it. The anticipation of who would get the name built up over time, and on the 5th of May, as time turned through 31 minutes past 6, the name was claimed, and people wondered who was the lucky player to get it. A few hours later, it was revealed to be none other than Jack himself, confirming the sniper was the real deal and cementing snipers as a whole into the community. From that point, people started to respect new snipers that popped up a whole lot more. It went from "why are you doing this?" to "how are you going to make this better?" And there was a whole lot more support behind it. And as you may expect, the next 6 months turned into a huge rush of people trying to be the best and most consistent sniper out there. Throughout May, Jack continued to claim almost any name he went for, selling the names on for the cheap prices they usually went for in the community. But as we move forward a month, we're reminded of a website I mentioned earlier was in development at the time, NameMC. June was when it really started to pick up traction, and began to offer space for adverts. Randomly out of nowhere, this super basic, blue background, white text banner came up saying, "Snipe your own name, mcsniper.com. Many people were wary of this, thinking it was probably some sort of scam for money or possibly account details, but after some time and confirmation, it began to beat out Jack Sniper, and turned out to be completely legitimate. But rather than it just being some private sniper developed basically on impulse, this turned out to be the first example of a full-scale, company-style sniper. It had its own website and operated a proper pricing system, setting a snipe at $5, never going above, and always being first come, first serve. This allowed a friend of mine to snipe LMFAO for just $5, alongside other names like Caroline and Pegasus, all of which would sell for hundreds of dollars now. MCS began to beat out Jack so much that the community was putting a lot of pressure on him to improve and work on his bot more, and it eventually got to the point where he ended up giving up to save stress and to work more on college. Even so, he still cemented himself as one of the founders and biggest contributors to the modern OG community. And that was it for Jack. MC Sniper became the new #1 place to go for a cheap and easy OG name. But as it happened, that didn't last for long. It's important to note that probably the most important thing when it comes to having a quick and consistent sniper is how many servers and proxies you have sending requests and running the code for you. See, at their core, all snipers do is send a bunch of requests to Mojang's API to claim their name. So if two snipers use the exact same code, but one has more servers closer to Mojang's database, they'll get more names. And in late June of 2015, somebody did exactly that. A user by the name of Skions decided to make a sniper of his own, but he didn't just buy a few proxies to make something okay, he completely outsped McSniper to the point where he would beat them around 80% of the time. It was a huge majority, but not enough to entirely ruin MCS. He got a few decent names, but treated it pretty casually. He would sell some accounts and also keep some for himself. His reign, however, would not last for long. Oftentimes when you buy servers from hosts, you buy them in monthly plans, and it seems as though he'd done just this. He'd bought just enough to outspeed McSniper, so he was able to beat them for a month, but once his membership ran out, he just dropped out instantly in July of the same year. This left MCS to regain their position as number 1 and win snipes as usual, but presented a stark reminder that it might not last for long. And of course, for the second time in a very short space of time, the number 1 sniper was again brought to a halt, but this time it would be for good, and nobody was left in charge. Customers of McSniper were sent this email stating that they were shutting down their sniping service effective immediately. All their queued snipes would still go ahead, but they wouldn't be accepting anymore. There was a lot of skepticism in the community as to why this may have been, as they originally just didn't comment on it. But a little while later, they had stated on their website it was because of concerns communicated to them by Mojang, and that any rumours stating anything else are purely false speculation. Coincidentally, many of their snipes from this point forward began failing too. It was as if they were using a more pay-as-you-go plan with their proxies, and not using as many threads as they otherwise would have, so as to not use too much money in their final days. This led to them refunding many people and not really leaving the community on a super high note. But even so, they still really did pave the way for commercial sniping, and improved bot snipers significantly. But moving away from that, who would it be that would take their place? Sure, there were still hand snipers and small, unprofessional snipers, but who would people go to buy the snipes they wanted to get? Well, luckily, somebody had a plan that would go on to change the sniping game once more. After the death of MCS, there was a short hiatus from bot snipers. Not for too long, but just enough time for people to think some things through. The general community realised that it was something necessary. Having random people take names from the community was super annoying, and is one of the reasons you might not be able to find the owner of your favourite name right now. But with the market reopened, it wasn't long until eventually, in November of 2015, the gap was filled by possibly the single most annoyingly named sniper possible, McSniper.co. Yes, that's different to McSniper.com, but was named as such because they wanted to continue the legacy .com had left behind, and failed to consider the brain melt this would cause documentary YouTubers covering their story in the future. They aimed to use the same business model, first come, first serve, set price method, and generally just fill the gap that .com had left behind. And they well and truly did their job. After cementing their place in the community with getting the name off, sniping as a whole was back to normal, and people had someone to rely on again, rather than just banking on hand sniping like they did so many months ago. They also introduced the idea of transferring names, the act of changing the name on one account and sniping it onto another one of your own accounts, either for the purpose of putting it onto a cape account or a better secured account. This wasn't super utilised at the time, but was more of a concept for anyone willing to try it out. It was impressive how well the developers managed to fill the gap though, and their hard work would pay off in the future, as .co would go on to be one of the longest lasting and best known snipers out there. But that didn't come easily. It didn't take long until .co had their first of many challenges, one that would set the mood for how many bumps in the road they would end up facing over the next few years. In this screenshot of the original sniping thread on MCM I showed earlier, you may have noticed a user by the name of Skill. At the time of the post, he wasn't super well known, but was asking if he could buy the original auto-clicker. But over time, he grew in the community and eventually decided to try his own hand in the sniping game. He got in touch with a developer who he paid well to code a full-scale sniper for him, and somehow in a very short time span, it became the best sniper out there. Whether this was down to having more proxies, servers with better ping, or any other factor didn't really matter. He was still beating out McSniper, consistently. But it's only been 2 months, that didn't make .co the longest running sniper. Well, you'd be right if they had actually quit. In the display of motivation and patience I wish I had for my college work, he realised he couldn't keep up with skill and had no reason to invest any more in the sniper. But instead of quitting, he kept his sniper low power and ran it in the background on lower tier names, never quite dropping out the picture but not being at the top either. It was of course a bad time for them, but they played it smart and played it long. For the time being though, Skill kept control over high tier names on the market. It's not as if anyone had a say in all this, but people DM'd him if they wanted to pick up a name that was dropping. However, something about Skill was uncovered slowly over time. Skill used Skype DMs to talk to his clients, and as we know, nothing good has ever happened over Skype DMs. Jokes aside, it was uncovered that Skill wasn't all as legitimate as people had made him out to be. The details I managed to find were slightly hazy on this, but in short, people began to realise that he'd had a history of scamming, and that hadn't changed with the coming of his new sniper. He would often sell a snipe to somebody as normal, but if he got a new, higher offer, he would take that one and not refund the original offer. In the midst of all this though, a very familiar name for many of you decided to also try his hand in competing. Cheerful. In around June of 2016, he decided to partner with a user named Ninja and gave it a shot. This new sniper, creatively dubbed Cheerful Ninja, did alright in the start, but over time it began to grow and grow, and would eventually consistently outspeed Skill's sniper. Whether it was this or the scamming allegations that caused Skill to quit is pretty arbitrary, as nonetheless, he was gone. This opened up the playing field for MCS to come sprinting back in and instantly start competing against Cheerful, a rivalry which would continue for months, all up until around late 2016, when probably the biggest step in that era of sniping was taken. Around that time, a bunch of people had been scammed in a pretty small space of time, with all of their accounts pulled and having to pay a ransom to get them back. Those who paid the ransom decided that they really needed to get the names off those accounts, and their minds all jumped back to what I mentioned earlier, transferring. Most people just decided to use McSniper to move the name onto a new account with fully working security. But for whatever reason, a friend of mine with some of these scammed accounts didn't feel super confident about this. So, seeing as just a few weeks earlier the name Relax had been hand sniped using a gift code, he asked and paid Cheerful to code a separate sniper using gift codes instead of old Mojang accounts. Cheerful spent a good amount of time working on this and eventually finished. His test transfers succeeded, and finally, so did all of the actual transfers using this method. However, the same couldn't be said for the NCS transfers, with names such as Cool and Swag being lost to hand snipers. This incident led everyone to believe that gift code sniping was the way forward. It was then implemented into both snipers, and an even bigger rivalry began again between Cheerful and .co, lasting for even longer this time. In fact, these snipers were so well matched that it actually began to create duplicate accounts, due to both of the bots creating different accounts with the same name at exactly the same time. This conflict lasted so long that it was only around November of 2017 when a new sniper co-owned by SMKM sprung up out of nowhere and was somehow faster than both Cheerful and .co. I don't want to go into all the specifics of this for fear of boring you, but to put it as simply as possible, this prompted Cheerful and MCS to begin trying out another completely new method that you may have run into yourself trying to snipe a name, the block method. In short, this was done by having a fresh Mojang account that didn't have Minecraft bot on it, and then attempting to redeem an invalid Minecraft gift code. This exploited Mojang's system into reserving the name for that Mojang account for 24 hours, as it assumed the failure was down to something such as a failed credit card transaction, and gave you a grace period so you could look into it. The name would then be blocked to everyone other than that single Mojang account, and after a few hours, the sniper would unblock the name and instantly snipe it back onto another account. To make this work for the snipers, however, would mean essentially entirely recoding the bot, which McSniper's owner just didn't have the time or motivation for. So he put out a public statement apologising and saying he was going to shut down the sniper so he could focus more on college, laying down both his own and the original McSniper's legacy. But this meant nothing for the other two, apart from less competition. Cheerful implemented the new block method, but SMKM was still winning over them, meaning Cheerful then began to invest a bunch more money into servers, proxies, and a bunch of other words that I don't understand. Because of this, they began to retake the lead and put the final nail in the coffin for the rest of the competition, with SMKM also quitting due to not wanting to invest anymore himself. And that was it. Cheerful had won the war. And from 2018 through 2019 and into 2020, they reaped the benefits of becoming known as the ultimate sniper, gaining the title of unbeatable. They completely monopolized the market and have done for way longer than anyone else has ever managed to, and they snipe every single name they go for, with a few exceptions of course. But jokes aside, I have talked in other videos about how insane Cheerful's monopoly actually is. They single-handedly control the economy, flow, and spread of OG names across the entire community. The story of how I got my name is an incredibly rare one, as it's very difficult to hand snipe a name or code a simple turbo to grab one of your own. It always has been, and it always will be. In fact, with how stuff's going at the moment, it seems as though Cheerful will last forever. At least, that's what I wrote back in June of 2020. Right now, that's never been farther from the truth. Anarchy is the only word I can really use to describe it. With methods, rate limits, APIs, and metas changing constantly, it's no wonder that there isn't a reliable way to get a dropping name for your own. But how did we get here? How did we go from a complete and utter monopoly in Cheerful to complete and utter anarchy in 2021? To answer this, we need to go back to when I wrote the first part of the script, June of 2020. Just before this time, Cheerful was still in power. They were still using the old blocking method and were losing barely any names, but suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, Mojang had patched the blocking exploit, rendering the method completely useless, and forcing them to go back to the old way of sniping names directly onto provided accounts. This was fine, I guess. It was a bit of a bump in the road for them, but nothing they couldn't handle. Names such as Shaw, Obsidian, and Robber are all examples of successful snipes they got using this method. However, it seemed that that wouldn't last for much longer. On the 1st of June, this video surfaced by a user named Goldline, titled How I Sniped Name, Moon. It shows a program of his, evidently named Pepe MC Sniper, with the text, Target Moon sniped name successfully. He goes on to mess with Cheerful a little and then proves that he did indeed own the name. In another video of his uploaded the same day, he shows how it works, and in basic terms, it's a turbo. Goldline realised that he could beat out Cheerful in what can only really be described as brute force. In short, all he really did was send an entire Armenian defense army against the name change endpoint with a huge amount of SFA accounts. He didn't care about keeping the names nor the money at all, so he invested in a few hundred of these semi-full access accounts, ran them through a very simple piece of code that he hosted on multiple proxies and just sorta hoped. And it worked. Over the next few days he ruined Cheerful, sniping Mars, Threat and Harm, not forgetting to gloat and troll Cheerful in the form of skins and fake Discord names along the way. But as I mentioned, this guy just simply didn't care. He quickly made a name for himself as a massive troll, as is evidenced by the skins on his accounts. And this affected the integrity of his accounts too, with some being hacked, some being pulled back, and some being deleted entirely through support and then instantly applied onto cape accounts, such as Harm. But at this point that didn't matter anymore. His point had already been proven. As one of my sources HX7 put it, he pioneered the whole thing. He showed that anyone can beat a well-funded sniper with lots of resources. That's what opened the floodgates. From this point, Cheerful made a bit of a comeback, but then started to lose names slowly to new snipers that kept popping up. HX7, Tempest, Deviants, and Saga are all examples of SFA snipers that took names away from them. All of this meant that Cheerful's reputation had begun to tank pretty hard, and because of this uncertainty, less and less people had begun paying them for transfers. So while I don't have the reasoning straight from their mouths, it's likely that this, along with all the refunding and reinvesting that they would have to do, brought them to the 28th of November 2020, when they would snipe their last ever name. You could argue that this being the name top 10 is rather poetic for this, given that they have well and truly cemented their position at the top of the list of Minecraft name snipers, but then you could also just not do that and move on with the script. The sniping scene gave the effect of a war-torn battlefield, with none of the generals surviving, just a few horses and the odd soldier from either side managing to scamper away unharmed. Deviants and Saga were dominating the sniping scene with their SFA snipers, and at one point were even trying their hand at transfers. However, not long after, the metaphorical sun rose over the battlefield in the form of December, which brought the news that all new accounts created had to be Microsoft accounts. Blocking names still wasn't an option. However, a new endpoint called Create Profile was found. If you paid for the game first, then picked the name by sending a bunch of requests to the new endpoint, you would get priority. You could pay for an account, wait for a good name to drop, then snipe it onto a brand new account. You heard me right, gift code sniping was back. The first person to utilize this was Zin, sniping Sunday onto a brand new account. Hello and Zonix are also good examples of this, which happened just one day later. And then later in January, Monarch and Charlotte would be sniped, sparking both HX7 and Cupid respectively to try their hand in the sniping scene. Over time, more and more people began seeing this new opening and created bots and snipers of their own. Names like Kami, Clover, Berry, Hawk, and more popped up until there were almost a dozen, all using the exact same methods. The creator of Cupid, another one of these gift code snipers, told me that it's got to the point where it's literally just a case of optimizing it and gaining any edge you can over your competitors, which can be really difficult. He also said that there are more snipers now competing for top names than there ever used to be, and there is no single sniper right now that is able to get every name consistently. Some snipers have good weeks where they seem to get tons of names, but the next they get almost none. It seems to be super back and forth now, and there's no real way to predict what's going to happen next. So unless you're a Saudi prince or a Bitcoin billionaire, there's really no way to get a dropping name, or to transfer names between accounts. In the last few weeks, however, it has been flattening out very slightly, and some people are almost hesitant to call it Anarchy. Most big names are being shared between the big, established sniping services, rather than just random players with DIY gift code snipers or turbos, but the meta is still changing every single day, and it's not a good idea to hedge your bets with a single sniper. And that pretty much brings us to the present day. As of right now, everything is still very, very uncertain in the community, and apart from the odd temporary exploit and smaller sniper, I've covered pretty much everything up to this point in the community. I wish I could come up with some sort of poetic ending to the script, but there really just isn't one. All I can say is that name sniping is far from over in Minecraft. Right now there's more people than ever interested in trying to get an OG name for themselves, with dropping names like these getting hundreds of views on NameMC. Not one of the people I interviewed was able to predict anything about the future, but with the upcoming arrival of Microsoft migration, it probably won't be long until we see even more advances in this crazy business. But for now, that's where this story ends. If you're watching this video just after it went up, I'm currently streaming live on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/IGNChucky. Come say hi, hang out, and ask any other questions you guys might have. This script has literally been almost a year in the making, and I think I calculated I worked like 50 hours just on the research and writing alone, so please let me know what you guys thought of it in the comments below. Thank you to Puzeh, Doge, HX7, and Emil for helping me with this video. I really wouldn't have been able to go into this much detail without all your help. But if you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, all that stuff, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.